What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
So Air France 447, in a way, like really inspired MH370 in some ways. So I was wondering, I was like, oh my God, there really is. Another thing that really struck me as uncanny was that there was a whole bunch of things that had to be true in order for any of this to be possible. Again, we talked about it had to be a Thales box, not a Rockwell box.
Yes.
It had to be a Boeing airplane, not an Airbus, because only Boeing has an accessible hatch to the electronics bay. It had to be a 777 and not any other kind of Boeing airplane, because the 777 was the only fly-by-wire airplane. The 787 is also fly-by-wire, but it doesn't have an accessible hatch. It also required that that Malaysian Airlines be subscribed to the lowest level.
And all these things line up.
And all of these, so if you take, and another one is that the two routes had to be north and south, because the satellite wobble only discriminates between north and south. It doesn't discriminate from east and west. Also, to discriminate north and south, it would be helpful if it was on the equator. This plane disappeared very close to the equator.
Why would it? Oh, because of the positioning of the satellite.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Another thing is that you would want to have your mirror flight going over open ocean. Now remember, this plane was originally flying east. If you wanted to just stitch it into the ocean, you could fly east and go to the Marianas Trench. You'd never be found there. But instead it went back. Why did it go west? So all of these things lined up to make this scenario possible, which itself to me seemed uncanny, right? But did I know that it happened? Did I know it's even possible? I mean, I speculate that if you could get into this box, then you could make this false trail of breadcrumbs. But did I know that it was actually possible? I mean, I didn't know why it wasn't possible, but it was only a suspicion. And so what I did was I thought, okay, if it went north, where would it go? It would go basically over India, over Nepal, over the Himalayas, over far western China, into Tajikistan, into Kazakhstan. And it would have wound up in central Kazakhstan, a very underpopulated kind of place.
Landed with Borat.
It would, yeah. I mean, Borat is actually not really anything like, has nothing to do with like actual Kazakhstan. But,
I know.
But yeah, I mean, more interestingly, it's where Russia's space program is. So Russia has, you know how we have Guantanamo Bay? It's like in this sort of hostile country, but it's like ours by treaty. They have a circle that's like 60 miles across in Kazakhstan.
Interesting.
That belongs to them, because that's where they launch people into space. And they were launching Americans into space too, because our space shuttle blew up and we didn't have a replacement for it. So there happened to be a big runway in a very remote part of this base that like there's nobody lives near it or anything. And so you could, if you flew there and it would be like an hour before dawn, you could like refuel it and fly it off and you'd be good. So I said to myself, okay, so if this went to Kazakhstan, you've got a very short list of potential perpetrators, because you would have to be, like we're talking about, like infinitely sophisticated, like infinitely clever and crafty and ruthless. And you're winding up in Kazakhstan. So who like is allied with Kazakhstan? Kazakhstan is a client state of Russia.
Yeah.
So who's on the plane? Well, there was a Russian sitting about 12 feet from the hatch in first class. And there were two Ukrainian guys sitting under the satellite data unit.
Like
SATCOM.
Friendly to Russia Ukrainian guys? Or,
So
you know, that's kind of
this was at a
an important
time-
distinction.
It is an important distinction, and it's confusing. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of Ukrainians have had to explain. A lot of people in Ukraine speak Russian as a primary language. A lot speak Ukrainian. The fact that you speak Russian does not mean that you love Putin. Doesn't mean that you're culturally any different from anybody else. But when this happened, you mentioned you were in Italy at the time, and that what people were obsessed with was
Crimea.
Putin's annexation of Crimea. Now, how did Putin do it? Now, Putin, it's important to realize, is a spook. He is a former KGB officer.
Right.
And he looks at the world through...
Yeah, you got me for a minute there. I was like, where's this going?
anyway, so how does he? So he does things in spooky ways, right? He was famous for. I mean, this is alleged, but I think it's widely believed that when he first came to power, he wanted to go to war with Chechnya.
He did.
And so he blew up like
Russia. I had David Satter in here, the guy who broke the story. He's been in here twice.
Before the KGB, there was the NKVD in the 30s that was responsible for murdering hundreds of thousands of people.
Like the pogroms and stuff?
No. Pogroms were ethnic, anti-Jewish for the most part. Riots.
Right.
No, this was the Great Terror during the 1930s that Stalin launched against real and imagined opponents in order to bring the country completely to its knees.
If you read David's books and look at the evidence he has, 100%.
Okay. So here's a guy who is not afraid to blow up or kill hundreds of citizens for the purpose of like whatever arcane purpose he feels like might be merited. He takes over Crimea not by rolling tanks over the border, but these guys show up, little green men. They're not wearing any insignia. They claim to be local separatists or something.
Not aliens, to be clear. You got to be careful in here, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But... yeah, I mean, but it's like that kind of like, we don't know what reality is. They are little green men. They are like from another dimension. We don't know who they are. They could be anybody. And this kind of like state of confusion and denial and crazy stories and theories and like people coming out of the woodwork. And so you don't know which way is up. And so these guys they speak Russian. They were Soviet Army veterans, which doesn't mean anything because everybody of that age group had to serve in the military.
Right.
But they're like kind of stocky looking guys and their family doesn't want to talk about them. And they were supposedly on this, but that's a whole nother thing. This is what I think you're starting to understand like why I had to do an open-ended podcast about this mystery.
Oh, yeah.
Because it like you said, layer upon layer upon layer.
Yeah, I think I told you on the phone, I said, I don't know how many of these you're going to do, but this is hundreds of hours potentially. If you're really going to go through every nook and cranny and possibility. Yeah. I mean, the things we've been talking about today, and I apologize to people who wanted me to ask all these questions in the middle. I'd be cutting you off every 2 sentences if we went, there's some things I have asked to clarify on, but that's why you're doing the podcast where you can bite size, for 30, 40 minutes, each one of these things individually. So today you're doing a good job with the overlay. Thank you.
So in June of 2014, 3 months into this mystery, I'm like, okay, who are these Russians? I just call them the Russians, even though 2 of them are Russian-speaking Ukrainians from Odessa. So what are they doing on the plane? I hire researchers, freelancers, one in Irkutsk, where the Russian in the first class is from, and I hire somebody to do some inquiries for me in Odessa, in Ukraine, where the 2 furniture salesmen are from.
And who, like, when you say you hire someone, like some kid on the street looking for $10, or like an actual reporter?
I didn't know how to do it. I had never done it before, and so I have a friend at the New York Times, and I was like, "Can you recommend a good person in Irkutsk?" And the Times, being who they are, have a very extensive network of fixers and freelancers and people who can.
And they got some fixers in there, huh?
Yeah, so we need some fixing, and so this really fantastic person was working on it for me, and I was like, okay, we're going to figure out if the Russians are behind this. So these people were busy at work when I get a call in July 29th, 2014. Was it July 29th? It was somewhere in July, 17th maybe. Anyway, I got the date wrong already. I get a call. Can you come into CNN and talk about the Malaysian Airlines 777 that was shot down in Ukraine?
That's right.
And I was like, I think you mean Malaysia. And they're like, no, this is a different one.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit.
That one they did do.
Because I'd been thinking like that maybe this whole thing is about Ukraine. Because so everyone was like, well, what's the point? Why would you steal a plane and take it to Kazakhstan? And there's, again, no good motives really. But the thing the fact that this MH370 had was that people stopped talking, certainly in America, maybe not in Rome, but in the United States, people immediately stopped paying attention to Crimea and started talking to MH370. CNN talked about nothing else for like 2 months.
I believe that in America. I wasn't in America at the time. But
every time, and it wasn't out of nefariousness or whatever, but like the fact is that every time CNN tried to talk about anything else, their ratings cratered.
Oh, funny how that happens.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
So people were legit obsessed with this, and it's all they wanted to talk about. And so it kind of made sense that there was a nexus between, you know, this spooky espionage leader of Russia and this sort of like difficult to parse kind of nonsensical action that involved like killing a lot of civilians.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.